Morning, and welcome to this meeting of the Black Isle and East Ross Area Committee. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and thereafter archived for public access via the Highland Council's YouTube channel. So good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's lovely to see you all after the summer recess. And especially, first of all, before we do anything else, I'd like to welcome Laura Dundas to the meeting. It's lovely to have you along. This must be your first one, is it, Laura? Super. Okay. So Fiona, could you do the roll call and any apologies that you've got?
Morning, members. Councillor Atkin.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Colley, I think, is still not with us, but hopefully soon. Councillor Dundas.
Present.
Thank you. Chair, you're here. Councillor Loudon.
Present.
Councillor McCallum.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Present.
And there's apologies from Councillor Smith. Thank you, Chair.
Super, that's great. Okay, before we start, do we have any declarations of interest for the meeting? Fantastic. I'm loving how fast this is going. So we're on to item number 3. So over the recess period, it was just for members to note that the powers in relation to recess powers were not exercised. So that's just for noting. And then if we can go straight on to item number 4, we've got the police report with Richard Ross. So can I hand over to you, Richard?
No problem, Chair. My intention would be to run through the report and then take questions at the end if you're content with that. Perfect, thanks. So, morning, everyone. Obviously, this is the report for the Black Isle and East Ross Area Committee for the period covering the 1st of April 2023 until 31st of March 2024. So, as you'll be aware, there is a new area commander for North Highland area, Chief Inspector Callum Smith. He's unavailable today, so I'll present the report on his behalf. So, hopefully you've all had a chance to read the report. I'll just try and pick out the sort of key points for you. So, in terms of that, the statistics being reported now at North Highland Area Command level, rather than down to individual committee level. So that the North Highland Command area does incorporate Black Isle and East Ross within that, but I can give local context if required in relation to any of the statistics. So obviously the interpretation of statistics is key to what we do. Data is still skewed to an extent by the COVID period in terms of 5 and 3 year averages. It will take time for that to come back to normal. So in terms of the introduction by the Area Commander, he's mentioned that we maintain our presence on the Highland roads, enforcing road traffic legislation, and I'll talk more about that, and you'll see by the figures what's referred to. Has been aware that it's a particular area of concern to residents and councillors, and an area that we focus on. It's good to see from the report there's been a it's not good to see, there's been a slight increase in serious assaults, which may be linked to our licensed premises and annual events which have returned. There has been a slight increase in antisocial behaviour related incidents. It is pleasing to see that there's been a reduction in frauds, which I'll talk about. You'll also know there's a significant reduction in missing in person inquiries from last year. That's obviously pleasing to see for the individuals involved, but also for the significant demands it places on our resources. There has been a slight increase in the previous year in relation to hate crime, which I will talk about. I will also talk about our work in relation to serious and organised crime. In terms of local policing priorities, they remain as road safety, road crime, antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder, acquisitive crime, protecting vulnerable people, serious and organised crime, terrorism and public order. So moving on in terms of road safety and road crime, you'll see from the statistics that are in the document on page 4, the number of fatalities from road traffic collisions is down on the last year to date and also the 5-year average, which is pleasing to see. There has been an increase in detections for drink and drug driving, and that is both against the 5-year statistic and the year to date. And again, there's been an increase on both measures in relation to speeding offences. So I'd say is in terms of drink, drug driving and speeding, that is an indication of the proactivity of the police officers within the North Highland Area Command, whether that be road policing officers or local response officers. The bottom shows a graph of the 3 mainland command areas, and you'll see that North Highland area, the detections for drink and drug driving is higher than both the Inverness Area Command and the South Highland Area Command. Whilst it's not good to see people are still willing to take that risk, it is pleasing to see that the proactive approach is detecting a significant number of these individuals. Obviously, road safety continues to be a priority for our preventative work. In terms of antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, there's the statistic there show that in terms of the ones we report against, murder has stayed static. An increase for the year to date, and it's higher than the 5-year average. Assaults have gone down against year to date and the 5-year average, but as I've said, serious assaults have increased very slightly by 1 on the year to date, but are below the 5-year average. And drugs possession offences have increased by 35 against the year to date, but are below the 5-year average for that offence. So again, that's showing an increase in proactivity on the previous year. The vast majority of drug possession cases are a result of officers' stop checks of people. The document goes on to detail the role of the harm prevention officer, which I've talked about previously at committee meetings. That role still continues to have good effect in the area. It's a Highland-wide post based in Inverness, but the officer does do a lot of work in the North Highland area, working with partners to target Cuckooing and County Lines activity and to assist those who are vulnerable to that through a multi-agency approach. So that's funded by the NHS Highland via the Highlands Alcohol and Drug Partnership. There's then a section in the report on the No Knives Better Lives. I won't read that, it's there for reading. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to cover that. In terms of acquisitive crime, housebreaking into dwellings, there has been a slight increase in the last year to date and a very slight increase on the 5-year average. Frauds have gone down compared to both the year to date, but they are up on the 5-year average. That is a national trend we're seeing, where there's a lot more frauds, particularly online type fraudulent activity. Theft by shoplifting is up against the 5-year average and the year to date, and again, that is consistent with the national picture of shoplifting increasing. Theft of motor vehicles has increased in terms of both measures, the 5-year and the last year to date. Then the document then goes on to talk about some of the preventive work we're doing in terms of the banking protocol, which still delivers good results in our area, preventing frauds as they're happening live time, crimes in action, and that's done with the assistance of the financial institutes that are based in the area. Then talks about parcel scam frauds and Rural Watch, which I would encourage you all to sign up for if you haven't done that already. Moving on to protecting vulnerable people. In terms of rape, there's a slight increase on the year to date, and it's slightly above the 5-year average. There's quite a significant drop in domestic crime with a reduction of 84 on the year to date, and sitting about 60 below the 5-year average. Hate crime has increased by 15 on the year to date and is sitting above the 5-year average. I would say that's probably not unexpected with the introduction of new legislation in the number of incidents that were reported at that time. In terms of missing people, a large drop of 107 on the year to date. And so we don't report on 5-year average. What I will say in terms of missing persons alone, that is on an N division level. So that's the whole of the division rather than just North Highland area. The way our system works, we can't break that down into the individual command areas. There's further context in relation to the missing people statistics below. I won't go through each one, but it details the category of missing people. And as you see, there's been a vast reduction in all apart from one area where there's been a slight increase in children going missing. Moving on to serious and organised crime, we report on one statistic there, which is drug supply offences. You'll see there's been quite a large increase of offences detected in the command area, rising by 18 over the year, and it is above the 5-year average. Again, that's an indication of proactive work. There's not really crimes reported to us. It's work that's detected by officers through stop checks or proactive enforcement of drugs legislation. The document then goes on to detail work in relation to county lines activity and preventive work we're doing. There's no doubt the area continues to be at risk from county lines activity, and it's vital that all agencies play their part in tackling that. The document then provides information in relation to counter-terrorism. We don't provide any statistics. It's purely details of preventative programs which are there for you to read, and I don't intend to go through that. The document then has detailed crime statistics. It's quite a lot. I won't go through them all, but I'm happy to discuss any that you wish to ask me regarding. And that is the report. As the chair, I'm happy to take any questions following that.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for all the work and effort that's gone into that report, but more importantly, all the police officer time that's gone into keeping our communities and our localities as safe as possible. I have a few probably comments or questions on the report first, and then I will open it up to other members. One of the things that I was delighted to see was the reduction in looked after children, especially going missing. And I'm just wondering if you have any knowledge or information about why you think that has been such a dramatic change. And one of the other statistics I was surprised to see was the low number of detection in the rates of drivers using mobile phones. And I was just interested to know if you thought that was that drivers are maybe becoming more socially responsible and not driving with phones as much, or if you think that it's just a harder offence to detect. Yeah, so, and the last one that I wanted to pick up on was the big increase in shoplifting, and just wondered if you had any thoughts on those three. Oh, but there was one more, and that was I was very interested in the term about cuckooing as the crime for the county lines, and I hope to hear a little bit more about that. And so what I'll do is I'll ask you those, and then I'll open it up for other members if that's okay.
No problem, Chair. So the first one in terms of looked after children going missing and the reduction for that. So in terms of that, we've now got, I think I've mentioned it before, we've got a liaison officer allocated to each of the homes for looked after children. And what we try to do is work with both the staff and the residents to try and reduce incidents of that. So probably what we're now seeing is the return on that we're getting a reduction in numbers. Obviously there can be peaks and troughs with that, depending on who's in and what the issues that they're dealing with are at the time. There can be many reasons looked after children go missing. As I say, it does go in peaks and troughs, but at the moment the sort of proactive work seems to be paying dividends. In terms of mobile phones, so hopefully it is starting to become, socially unacceptable. There is still people who continue to take that risk, and we do try and detect them. We do have campaigns, and we do officers on patrol, protect the road policing will target that criminality. Again, that's one that it probably fluctuates, the statistic in relation to mobile phones. One depending on our activity, but also who's the local policing, what their activity in relation to it as well. In terms of shoplifting, yeah, there has been a significant rise. That is a national picture of shoplifting, but it's not something that is unique to this area by any means. And we are trying to work with the retailers to reduce the potential to shoplift, target hardened premises, and work with them in preventative techniques. But also we do work with our third sector colleagues in relation to what I would say is probably the small percentage that is people stealing for need, to try and divert them to other means rather than stealing. But so there is a lot of work ongoing in terms of shoplifting at this time.
Thank you. I think the last one was just that I asked was about the cuckooing in county
cuckooing.
lines.
Yeah. So in terms of cuckooing, obviously cuckooing and county lines activity kind of goes hand in hand almost. Cuckooing's where they will always take over the home of a vulnerable drug user to use for selling drugs from, hence the term cuckooing. We know that does happen. We work closely with our partners and partner agencies to try and identify those that are vulnerable to that, and our harm prevention officer, where we get information that somebody is susceptible to that, our harm prevention officer will proactively visit them to try and prevent that, or we will take enforcement action depending on what's required.
Thank you so much for that. So, Councillor Loudon, you have your hand up next. We'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the first thing probably want to do, Richard, is to thank police officers for the service they're giving. I think we've all seen over the last week, a level of violence against police officers that really is totally unacceptable in other parts of the country. But I know that's something that all of you are, acutely aware of every day. So, I thank you for the service that you're giving, and I hope that that the violence we've seen in other places doesn't follow a path to our door in the Highlands. I think you covered a number of areas, and I was struck by the number of them that are roads related. There's careless driving, speeding, drink and drug driving, and the unlawful use of a motor vehicle as well. So that presumably is insurance and things like that. There's clearly an issue with drug supply offences, shoplifting. These have already been covered. The number of looked after children missing, I like the Chair. I was curious about that. I know that was a top priority for police in the past, when reports of a vulnerable child going missing. That would be the top priority for officers to attend to. I'm hoping that the reduction is closer working with the people looking after vulnerable children, and not a revision of police priorities. So you can maybe give me some reassurance in that area. And I suppose the other thing I should raise, we've seen the report today, and the report covers the whole of the Highland region. So clearly there's a significant saving in terms of resources that you're not looking at that individual areas. But there have been a number of comments when we go around community councils. There are a few reports appearing, and almost no attendance at any community council across the area. So I'm wondering if there's an up-to-date list. There's such a churn in terms of officers. Is there an up-to-date list of who the liaison officer is for each community council? And if there is, can you circulate that to members so that we're able, if things are difficult in our own area, who do we contact? I think it's important that there is that link. So I'm hoping you can help me out with those.
No problem. I'll try and cover off each of the points. So first of all, welcome your comments in relation to police officers and the recognising the level of violence that's currently ongoing. And yes, I share you. I hope it doesn't come anywhere near our area. In terms of the road traffic statistics, yes, there's a lot of statistics reported on in terms of road traffic, but that probably evidences the high level of proactivity in relation to road traffic, which is one of our priorities in terms of casualty reduction, is to proactively police the roads and detect offenders. For looked after children, I can give the reassurance you want. So nothing has changed in terms of our policy. Looked after children, any missing person is risk assessed and graded as soon as a report is received. And that's based on a number of factors, including any vulnerabilities that person has. So there has been no change of policy in terms of that. What I would say is the reduction numbers is probably down to the work we do working with the homes, with the children themselves, but also we have internally we have a group where we review regular missing persons to try and identify any opportunities to reduce these incidents. So that I would say it's down to the proactive work rather than any change of policy. In terms of the report, so I should clarify, the report is statistics are North Highland Command Area. They're not the whole division. The only one that's the whole division is missing people. The rest is statistics is North Highland Command Area. In terms of community councils, so each community council should be receiving a report from the allocated officer for each of their meeting. I know there is challenges with that, and that's not always happening. They all do have an identified community council liaison officer who should be known to the community councils. That's part of their role. They should know who their nominated officer is. But I can see if I can get a list circulated to yourself. Which is, as you said, people change, people move on. So the list quite quickly will become out of date for some as it does change. But yes, we can look at that. Obviously, we have had to, there's no secret that our resourcing challenges, and we have had to look at what is the priorities. And is the priority, having officers out attending to calls or going to the meetings in person when they can provide a report and be a point of contact. So we do sometimes have to balance what our resourcing allows us to do. So there is decisions to be made in terms of that, but they should at minimum be getting a report. And if that's not happening, I'll highlight that to the area commander. Hope that's covered all your points, Councillor. Councillor Atkin.
I think, yes.
Thank you. I attended a presentation about the county lines and the work you're doing, which I mean was like mind-blowingly eye-opening. and the number of gangs that are coming into the Highlands, it just occurred to me, one of my point that I made was, most of the antisocial behaviour that I would certainly get contacted about, and I'm sure many other councillors will have drugs somewhere in the mix. One thing that keeps, when people come to us, because they're too scared to go to anybody else, and that, they don't feel they can report things because they know that the neighbours would have known it was them, etc. But it's called a fine. Everything was fine until a boyfriend moved in to the property. Now, if, could we, working in partnership, be a little bit more on the case about who has the tenancy and who actually is entitled to live in these properties? And that we might then, get really early into the nub of unearthing some of these links and some of the, chains that go through, because just having one officer that looks at all the vulnerable people. I mean, women are vulnerable, and they pick the vulnerable women, don't they, to target. And I just feel if we're all working together, how can we help? How can people in our communities provide, really intelligence to help you guys, that you do the most phenomenal job in trying to, it's like trying to keep a lid on a exploding pot, isn't it? Because it's non-stop, these gangs coming in. I just wondered if that was an angle we could work really, really closely together with housing on who has the tenancies, and maybe we need to be a little bit tougher about, if you have a tenancy, you're the person who should be living in this property. You can't have every Tom, Dick and Harry moving in with you. That might help the situation. The second point about communities, I think, absolutely. I mean, your resources are stretched. It's a really high expectation to think that police officers can come up to every community council meeting. Is there a way of having, something that people know is going to come along, even if it's twice a year, just so that, we're not, just have changed the system basically, so that our expectations are realistic, I think, and manageable. Thirdly, your coffee with a cop in Orc, I have to put that, mention that, because it's huge, fabulous in the cafe, and I think that's a brilliant move. And on the ACT up, as we're seeing across the country, kids, young people are radicalized online. I just wondered how many of the program, the ACT early session, has been actually in our schools within this area committee, because I'm sure a lot of young people don't realize this is what extremist ideology even is, and actually they're vulnerable to it, especially, the Andrew Tates of this world with young men. Thank you.
Yeah, so try and cover the various points. So the first one was in terms of cocoon. I think you've probably hit the nail on the head that it's for the councillors. I would say it's about liaison with housing. If you become aware of, if you're getting complaints about particular properties, if they're council properties, I would suggest you go through housing, and then that links are established anyway from there on. If it's not council, you can come direct to police with any information, and we can assess it from there. In terms of meetings with community councils, I will link in with your commander for his thoughts on where we go in terms of meetings with community councils. The coffee with the cop is a very successful initiative. Works well in a number of areas. My intention is to keep that going, particularly over the Black Isle area. In terms of ACT, unfortunately, I can't give you how many has been done in the area. I will need to come back to you on what work has been done in terms of that.
I think Councillor Ross, you have some points, questions?
Thank you very much for the report. One of the points, Derek has actually raised it again himself about and Sarah also has mentioned it about the community councils. I've been at several over the last 6 months or so, and there has been no reports. So you are going to follow that up, so that's good. And the other thing that has been coming in is the abandoned cars, and we have quite a few of them down with us, but some are in the housing scheme, but there's abandoned cars out in the country, and in fact, it was Councillor Dundas was following this one up, and we were told it was taped up by the police. It wasn't the council that taped it up, and it's been there for several months by the side of the road, and to the annoyance of many of the residents nearby. And they were just wondering when it's going to get moved. What is the procedure there? Because I have seen cars. In fact, there was one by Eventon for weeks on end at the junction that was taped up, and it took weeks before that got moved. Maybe you could enlighten me as to what the procedure is. Thanks.
Okay, so first of all, I know your comments again about community council reports, and I will follow that up. In terms of abandoned cars, that the remit for abandoned cars actually sits with the council rather than police now to resolve abandoned cars. If there's police tape on it, that's police aware tape. So I would need to know the reasons why there's police aware tape on it. If it's just that it's abandoned as to make sure the public know we are aware, then it would still sit with the council. But if it's in relation to crime, etc., it may be a police matter. So what I probably need to know is if you'll be able to email me the details of where this car is, and I can get that looked into further in terms of that particular one. But as I say, abandoned vehicles is a council issue now rather than a police matter.
Now, this is where I really find it quite confusing, because when you mention it to the council, they say the police sometimes say the council or the DVLA. So it seems that it's something that is not sitting firmly with anybody except it being abandoned where it is. So I think we need a clearer picture on that at some point.
Yeah, so if you send me the details of that one, so I'd say it's anyone's that have been highlighted us, we've been able to resolve through liaison with the council to get a resolve. So if you email me the details,
Okay.
I will look into that one.
Thank you.
Next, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your report. It was really interesting to read. I really appreciate the time you have all kind of put into that. I just noted that the assault of emergency workers was still quite high. I know it's not been as high as it has been in previous years, but it's still pretty high. And I was just wondering if there's any areas of the emergency service which are being sort of targeted in particular. Because I think I also wanted to check that those workers are getting some kind of support if they are being assaulted. You know, they're getting some kind of, I don't know, advice, or getting some kind of someone to talk to about it, because it must be horrendous to be at your place of work and to be physically assaulted. So I just wanted to make sure that those kind of people are getting the support that they need. And I wanted to thank you as well for the police speed van that was in Och over the summer. I know we've been having a lot of issues in terms of speeding through Och, so I know people were absolutely delighted to see the speed van. So I just want to pass on my thanks for that. And in terms of police officers attending community council meetings, I don't know if the other wards do this, but our community councils, they all meet together every few months, I think it is, or might even be twice a year, I can't quite remember. But I was wondering if it would be worth the police coming to that meeting and speaking to the whole of the Black Isle community councils together, rather than trying to go to individual ones, because I know it's not achievable. You are too busy and you're too stretched, but maybe if we could coordinate that so that you could do a report to all of the community councils together, that would save you a lot of time, and that could perhaps be replicated across other wards as well, and that way people are getting a bit of an update and getting some communication with the police. That might be a way to resolve it, perhaps.
Yeah, so they'll take each point in turn. So in terms of the assaults on emergency service workers, I would say the vast majority, by the nature of the work, is against police officers. There is some against other emergency service workers, but I'd probably say the vast majority is ourselves. I can't speak for what other agencies do in terms of support, but In relation to police officers that are solid, we have set processes we go through after each assault on a police officer in terms of offering them support and ensuring their well-being, and that's well ingrained in to our processes on a daily basis now to ensure there's that support. In terms of your comments about the camera partnership van being an OC, I'll pass on your positive comments to them regarding that. And for community council attendance, the basic kind of where I was hoping to go, and with community council attendance, about having a 6 monthly meeting with groups of community council chairs to allow them a forum to bring things up to us, rather than an expectation of attending individual community councils. But again, I'll speak to the new area commander regarding that for him to take that forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And
Okay.
thanks, Councillor Dundas now.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just wanted to, just on the back of what Morven was saying, the camera partnership van, it's been raised to my attention in Arabella, the increase of traffic flow due to what's going on down at Nig, the project down at Nig. In particular, they're having problems with HGV vehicles speeding. It's a 40-mile limit at the moment. They feel that they should be reduced to a 20, or at least there could be a camera put there to try and prevent the speed that these vehicles are coming down onto, in particular over the railway crossing, which is now causing damage to the railway, which they're looking at. What is the possibility of getting a camera prevention van out that way to monitor and help monitor the speed out there in Arabella?
Okay, and in terms of getting a camera van, there's one of the camera partnership vans to go out there. That's not something I can say yes or no to at this mean, but I can link in with them. They come under a completely different remit than myself, so I can link in with them and ask them to look at that as a potential location.
Well, thank you so much
No problem.
for all of your time today, Richard. Really appreciated it all, and it's been a pleasure as always having you with us.
No problem at all. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Right, now we are moving very swiftly on to item number 5, which is the Black Isle Place Plan. And we have Becky Richmond and we have Nick Wright with us today. And I have to say, I'm delighted to see the plan coming to committee at this point and how much work has gone into it. So we're going to be asked to adopt the plan and note the plan and look at the next steps of what's happening with the plan. But before I do that, I will hand over to Becky and Nick. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Nick and I will just briefly give some background to the production of the plan. Nick's got some slides that we'll run through, and then when we've done our bit, we'll hand over to Fiona. So for those of you who don't know, Opportunity Black Isle is the name of our Black Isle local place plan. Could you move on to the next slide, please, Nick? Thank you. So it was facilitated by the Black Isle Partnership, and it was funded initially by the Highland Council through the Place-Based Investment Fund, and then subsequently with Community Regeneration funding. The Black Isle Partnership received the funding in the early part of 2022, and it was anticipated that the plan would be completed with all the community engagement work done and the plan written by the end of December 2022. Next slide, please, Nick. Thank you. However, they were slow off the mark, so I wasn't hired. I was hired as the project manager, who I stay in Kilbokie, or just outside Kilbokie on the Black Isle. And I was hired in the June, and I began my work in the mid-July of 2022. And my first remit was to pull together a steering group of community council representatives, community group representatives, development trusts, to form a steering group that would then produce a tender brief that would then go out to look for an external consultant who would help with the facilitation of the community engagement and write the plan. we ended up with 3 community council reps and 1 rep from a development trust. It would have been good to have a larger representation, but the plan at the start or the process at the start was not well received by the community councils as a result of the community group that were taking it forward. So as a consequence of that, and to keep transparency in place, the steering group, I asked them to stay on, so that rather than just myself and Nick being representatives, we had a community steering group that the community were happy to have. Our first role was to put a tender brief together, which we duly did. It was sent out to 7 consultants, and there were absolutely no takers by the time of the deadline, because they felt that the actual 2022 deadline was just way too tight, and they also were intimidated by a Black Isle wide approach. It was something a lot of them hadn't really done before, and they didn't feel it could be done with just one project manager who was part-time and an external facilitator. Fortunately for us, Nick gave a little glimmer of hope that perhaps if we could shift the deadlines, he would be able to take the role on. And Nick was the one name that Diagnew, who was ward manager at the time, and Kai, who was working with her, had both said to me, you know, the person you really want is Nick, but you'll never get him. And here he was with a little glimmer of hope. So I grabbed that glimmer of hope, and we managed to shift the deadline, and Nick came on board. So could I have the next slide, please, Nick? Thank you. So he came on board, and in January 2023, and Highland Council kindly agreed to give us an extension of the completion date to June 2023. So I worked with the steering group, the BIP directors and ice cream architects to create a logo. Nick and I did a lot of work looking at earlier consultations that have taken place across the Black Isle. I think by the time COVID had come to an end, the Black Isle, as in many, many other areas, was probably consulted to death. And there was a huge amount of work that has been done over the last 15 to 20 years, great pieces of work that have gone absolutely nowhere. So rather than ignoring them, we went and looked at those, and we extracted themes from those, and also a great piece of work that the community councils have been doing with Ruairi Mair. And that provided us with our first set of themes that we were going to go out and engage on. The facts and the figures that we used were taken from Highland Council figures. And so we produced 7 boards in total. Each of them had 2 or 3 prompt questions on them, and we took those out into the community. In February, we began engagement with our elected members, further work with the Black Isle Community Councils, and also the Mid-Ross Community Partnership. And also at that time, Fiona Richardson, who at that point was the Area Place Plans Project Manager for Highland Council, she really became our 3rd and key member of the Place Plan team. She provided us with a link into Highland Council that I don't think we would have got had it just been myself and Nick. And I think as a result of that, it made the engagement that came later, and then the engagement that we then did with council officers as a result of the data that we had picked up, I think it put us in a much more valuable and a much more realistic position, and has meant that this plan wasn't just a wish list of things that people want on the Black Isle. It's actually been written, hopefully objectively, with things that are achievable. Some may be a little bit aspirational, but always in mind of resetting the relationship with Highland Council, which has been a big theme as we've gone through this process. So at this point, the engagements began, the community engagements, and Nick really came on board. So I'll hand over to Nick to talk us through the next bit of the process.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Becky. So there were really three stages, most of which were actually just about complete by January this year, February this year. And really the 3 stages you can see on the slide there. The intention was first of all, to check with everybody across the Black Isle who was interested that we got the aspirations right. And obviously there were some tweaks. So that was the 7 boards and the various other things that Becky was talking about. Then we moved on to having established, right, we seem to have the aspirations correct. What are the solutions? So then another round of discussions through various ways, including schools and that kind of thing, to look at solutions. And then once we'd worked out with the community the scope of those solutions, then putting those into a plan and checking that plan was okay. And that happened around January, February this year. And that's kind of morphed into a lot of discussion about how the community might work to help deliver the plan, but we'll come back to that at the end. So those are the kind of 3 stages, which really started in May last year and finished in February this year. A quick word about the geographical extent of the plan. You might be able to, so this plan is from the document, this map, sorry, is from the document itself, and you might be able to see there's a thin blue line between Conan Bridge through Tor down to North Kessock, which is the boundary between wards 8 and wards 9. And the plan originally started out as, or was originally envisaged as being just focusing on ward 9. But it became quite clear as we were starting the engagement, so this is back in sort of April, May last year, that in fact a lot of people, both in Conan and Muir of Ord, and of course Redcastle and that sort of area as well, saw themselves as part of the Black Isle, despite the extent of the Black Isle ward boundary. So after some discussion, it was agreed that we should extend the extent of the plan to not to stick to the ward boundary, which is of course so that's an administrative construct, but it should instead stick with what the community thinks of as the Black Isle. So that happened fairly early on in about May last year. The extent of the engagement across those 3 phases I mentioned, you can see some pictures on the screen there and a few numbers. Again, that's taken from the report. I'm not going to talk through that a great deal, except to say Becky's said very kind words about Fiona and myself, and it's equally important to say that without having the involvement of Becky as the person on the ground who has contacts and networks and was there to get around and go to schools and speak to people and deliver flyers and just be the ambassador for all this work over the last year, without Becky's involvement, we would never have got that scope of engagement. So I think that's both a personal thing, but it's also, I think, for other plans like this, having a local person on the ground is invaluable to get the trust of the community. So what came out of all that? So these images are from the plan itself. You can see them all in the back of the committee report. So out of all that 3 phases of engagement, distilling everything down, there seemed to be 4 big areas that were common across almost everyone which came back who commented in the consultations, and you can see that's the coloured blocks. Community infrastructure, think global, act local, sort of sustainability angle, the ability to get about both within the Black Isle and to Dingwall and to Inverness, and affordable housing. So those are the 4 things. We've tried very hard to write the plan so that it does what it says in the committee report. So the recommendations in the committee report, the first one is for the council to use the plan as a tool to inform and support decision making about the Black Isle. So what we've tried to do is make that as straightforward as possible. So yes, it's a statement of community aspirations, but we've tried to frame it in a way that fits with public sector agendas. And the best example of that is that little table there that shows the community aspirations down the left, and in headline terms, the big public sector agendas at the top about climate change, health and well-being, sustainable communities. There's lots of sub-agendas beneath those. Child poverty is one that's not on there, but is very big just now, for example. But the plan tries to hit all those agendas. And it also, for those councillors who are on the planning committee, and also those of you who aren't as well, the plan also tries to put National Planning Framework 4 into action on the ground by focusing on a network of places which can be the focus for what National Planning Framework talks about has been called local living. So really the maps in the plan, the spatial angle of the plan is all about trying to put National Planning Framework 4 into action on the ground. So there shouldn't be anything challenging in this plan which the council has any trouble with in terms of national planning policy. So again, that's trying to make it as easy as possible for the plan to be implemented. And just as an example of one of those 4 areas that I mentioned, so this is the getting about one. So getting about the Black Isle, getting to Dingwall, getting to Inverness. Each of the 4 is quite similar. It basically says what the community is aiming for. That's on the left-hand side there. What's already happening, because there is good work happening, and more has been happening since the plan was drafted, as Becky will say. And then on the right-hand side, what else is needed? And then some of them, there's a map. So that map is the diagram, essentially, of where improved connections are needed, whether that's by public transport, community transport, walking, cycling, whatever it might be. And then there's a series of actions. And we've tried, again, to distill it down. And what we've done, and again, this was someone's idea from the community, was rather than focus directly on projects, which is the right-hand side of that there, so things like improving bus timetables or speed reduction measures, rather than just focusing straight on projects, instead what the plan does is focus on what are the outcomes that the community is looking for, and that's the blue headings there down the left-hand side, because we think that's more useful for the council, for Green Freeport, community planning partners. We think that's more useful for decision makers than just saying it must be this project, instead focusing on what the community is aiming for. In Appendix 4, in the back, there's just a single page there which is signposting to a vast amount of information. So if anybody's interested, for example, in finding out what did people say about the Green Freeport, what did they say about their village, what did they say from schools, you can click on these links and you can go directly to all the comments that were made. So it's a bit like a database, if you like, which we hope will be useful. I'm sure councillors are far too busy to look at that, but I would hope some officers and some other organisations will find that quite useful. So that's a quick kind of overview of the plan. So I'll pass back to Becky to explain what's been happening since and what's about to happen.
Thanks, Nick. So in the background to all this work, one of the big questions, really right from the start, has been governance. Who is going to govern the plan? Who is going to take responsibility for driving the plan forward? Because we recognise that you can't just write this plan and hand it over to Highland Council and say, there you go, it's up to you now, you need to do this. Equally, it can't just be left to the community to take responsibility for it. There has to be a good working relationship between the public sector, who can help in various ways, not just financially, but also with support, legislation, that kind of thing, and the communities. We have a wealth of community groups and organisations on the Black Isle, as Sarah, Lindsay and Morven will know, many of whom are more than capable of carrying out sections of the plan. So governance has been there, and one of the things we heard very clearly from residents, just from ordinary people, was that whoever took responsibility for the governance of the plan had to be determined by community councils and by our elected members, because they see them as being the elected representatives for their communities. And I should say that, just to jump back a little bit, the Black Isle Partnership were exceedingly good in allowing Nick and I to go out on a limb with very little interference from them to carry out a true community-led engagement process. Where things differed slightly was when we came to the question of governance. The Black Isle Partnership is very much a project-focused organisation, whereas Nick and I were clearly hearing what the communities were saying about how they wanted to be represented. And as much as the project side of things, having a board, a group of people who will champion, advocate for this plan and make sure that it stays in everybody's mindset. So not just Highland councils, but high as well, the community planning partnerships. And so at the moment, my role as the place plan manager with the Black Isle Partnership has finished. But with my community council hat on, I'm working with the other community councils and our elected members to set up a board that will represent the community at an advocating and lobbying level. Talking about things that are already happening, because there are people who are not waiting for the plan to be registered. They're just referring to the plan and getting on and getting things done. Nick and I did 2 workshops with council officers at two stages of the engagement process. And when we went into the first meeting, we, I guess through a challenge, a nice challenge to them, was could they see themselves using the plan to inform their decision-making processes at the start of budget decision-making conversations, not at the end. And one of the most challenged officers there was one of the transport officers who was just not used to thinking that way. He had a set way of thinking and couldn't possibly see how we, coming from the community, could hand him a document and say, could you refer to that? However, we obviously said something that got the cogs turning, because by the second workshop, we could clearly see that he'd been thinking actually about how the place plan and some of the projects that were going on in the plan and the community already could be extended to take more of a pan Black Isle focus. At the beginning of this year, circumstances resulted in a change to who became responsible for the Ferrintosh wee bus. And Ferrintosh Community Council are working to set up a community transport organisation. And that same officer who is overall responsible for these things came back and said what he would like to see is a board of trustees that were Black Isle wide, so that once the organisation was established, not only would they be responsible for the running of the Ferrintosh wee bus, they would then be in a position to look at other transport projects across the Black Isle. So for Nick and I, that was a win. That was where we had clearly seen somebody who was completely challenged by our first question, having a think, and then as a result of the plan, thinking about how things could be done differently. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just being prepared to have a rethink. Thank you.
No, I have to say thank you, Becky and Fiona and Nick. The amount of work that has gone into this project has been immense, and I think, you know, the amount of times I've heard people say they've never seen engagement like it in the Black Isle, and they've never seen consultation like it in the Black Isle. I could have had, I could tell you that multiple times over, the amount of people that have said that. And I think the plan is probably one of the truest reflections of what the community actually wants in this out there. So I'd like to open it up to anybody else who has comments or questions. Marvin me.
Thank you. I don't have any questions because we've had such deep conversations about this already. So it's fantastic to see it coming to where it is now. I just want to take the opportunity to thank both you, Becky, Nick, and Fiona, because the work you've done is absolutely tremendous. It's huge, and I imagine it was incredibly challenging at times, and I imagine it was both frustrating, joyous, all things rolled into one. But it was a huge amount of work, and I just want to congratulate you, all of you, on the work that you've done. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Atkin, I think you're next.
Hi. Thank you very much to Nick and Becky and Fiona. I was just blown away when I was reading the whole plan, and you know, I'm actually bit excited about the whole thing. I hope something like this will be done in the Easter Ross Peninsula area, because we have had over the years umpteen surveys and reports done, so we have loads of information there. And I know that Fiona, we've had meetings, community partnership meetings and workshops, so I'm really excited. Thank you very much, Becky, for all your work on the ground, because I do know how much effort and time that takes, and Nick for putting it all together, and Fiona. So I'm quite excited, and Fiona, I'll be knocking on your door very shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Maureen.
I'll just add to the thanks, the toil and the sweat and the grief and the arguing and everything else that's happened in the last year. But just for the other members and in other wards who will be, hopefully following the same process, this isn't a kind of everyone. It ends up being something that perhaps you didn't think of in the first place. It kind of morphed into a different kind of plan from perhaps that was envisaged initially, whereas some people's plans might just end up being, we want to do X, Y, and Z project, and that's our focus. It entirely depends on I would just allow that kind of organic growth or not, and don't have any kind of set expectations at the start of the process. And as you say, Maureen, I mean, especially, the wealth of information that you will have is going to be phenomenal. You probably don't realize how much there is already out there to gather together. And it's a lot of work, and it doesn't have to, it can end up being whatever you feel you want it to be, is my point. And that it kind of is how you end up, because I think I don't know about you, Becky, I think we all thought maybe it would just be projects, and I've still kind of getting my head around how it will work. But actually, for us as councillors, we now know, we look at the plan and we kind of, it's in our psyche, the priorities of what we're going to invest our energy and emotional energy into. And when funding for the little bits and bobs comes through, we will then, however small or big the amount, we can say, does it reflect the priorities of the plan? Because that has to come first, rather than kind of trying to do everything. So I think it's a brilliant exercise just of itself for people to refer to. And it isn't about controlling every community group, having to deferring to a board to get approval to do anything. It's just get on with it and we see how it fits in. So the flexibility is really important. But, all power to the Becky and Nick. Just diplomacy, patience, etc. has been amazing.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there with, it is something that has to become organic, but equally the way you're talking about using the plan, referring to the plan is exactly how we saw it evolving and anticipating in it being used. So that's great. Thank you.
And then Councillor Loudon, you have your hand up as well.
No, I know. I hope you'll be able to cope with a comment from outside the Black Isle area.
Absolutely.
I wanted to chip in. I've quite a lot of experience of these, and this does seem to be an exemplar for other areas. It's quite widely talked about in that way. The work you've done, was ahead of the curve, really. Other areas are playing catch up, and what you've set out is, I think, a really helpful, informative way for other areas to tackle this activity. So thank you. I'm aware, from what you've said, that that the funding has come to an end. But I think the need for the work that you were doing hasn't. And I hope that this plan, like so many others in the past, doesn't fall flat due to a lack of resources to actually see it implemented. So I think that's the challenge to community councils and community groups in the Black Isle now, is to find a way, bit by bit. It won't all happen overnight, but bit by bit, to deliver on the challenges that you've identified. And I hope that it will be picked up and used in other areas as a very good indicator of how to engage with the public, and also how to plan the way ahead. And if I have a question for Fiona, how are things coming along in neighbouring areas?
I'm happy to give a really brief update on that. That you're right, as members have recognised, this is a best practice example, the Black Isle, and having been heavily involved in the Black Isle, and Becky and Nick have been very generous about sharing their processes and ways of learning. It does inform what we're doing in Easter Ross. Easter Ross will be coming to committee later in the year. We've been working closely with the community partnership in Easter Ross. What we're trying to achieve, similar to the Black Isle, it's a plan in one. We know that partners, service providers, communities are frustrated with multiple plans. So we're trying to do something slightly different in Easter Ross by having that one plan that sets out the priorities for investment development, but also around reducing inequalities through the community partnerships. We've been working really closely with the community partnership. But yes, we're aiming to have all of our area place plans at committee, ready for people to use as that tool by the end of the financial year, March 25. But as Nick and Becky started out at the beginning, the first deadline for this plan was 2022, and doing it right. What we've learned quickly, and this is not an excuse at all, is that to do things right take longer than you initially expect. But yeah, please be reassured, Easter Ross members, that we are working on the Easter Ross plan. I'll be with you soon.
But yeah, Fiona, I was going to ask you just if you wanted to comment more generally on the report that you've put in, because I think one of the things is, although your position has changed, like you've got such a wealth of experience now for place plans in other areas, and how you see these things all meshing together, really.
Well, what's really, really reassuring about the conversation that's just taken place following Nick and Becky's input is that people recognise that what we've got in our plans, these area plans, and noting that the Black Isle is a hybrid between the local place plan, that community-owned plan, but we're all there as partners in that area plan. We now have that powerful tool that can be used for decision making. Us, people responsible for making decisions as elected members, or for us as service providers in Highland Council and our wider partners, we need to know and understand what the needs of the communities are, and we can only do that by engaging with the community. So, we have that tool now. The report sets out how we see the plan being used in practice. Much of that's just been discussed and described in the conversation we've had. But, as we've set out already this morning, to achieve the outcome set in the plan, it's not going to be down to one party to deliver on these actions. It's clearly put that this, is a plan for everybody. There'll be a role for the community to deliver on actions independently or with support, for ourselves at Highland Council and our wider community planning partners, for our private sector partners. There's something for everybody in there. So this plan moving forward provides that framework to sort of bring people together to continue. That's been a success, in my role as the Area Place Plans Officer, and now in the community development role. The success of this has been the partnership kind of collaboration from the start. and we want to continue that. So in the report in section 7.2, setting out how the plan will be used, it describes some forums that we see this plan being used in, but that's not, there's forums beyond this. But in our area business meetings, in our own Highland Council internal service meetings, we'll use this as a discussion tool, as a decision-making tool, and in the community planning partnership. And I want to just further recognise, before moving back to the recommendations, just some of the highlights of the process. I think the community-led nature of this and the community ownership, Becky recognised at the start that there wasn't complete buy-in, but I would confidently say by the end of this that that we've got that greater support from a range of community organisations and partners that work in support, deliver services in the Black Isle. The engagement from the elected members throughout has been incredibly helpful. That checking in, that the additional kind of input and support, and rallying up members of the community to attend the engagements. The process has been recognised both regionally and nationally, and Becky and Nick and others have been invited to speak at certain forums to share their experiences, and that goes great towards other people kind of learning who, as Councillor Loudon said, are just a few steps behind, but sort of learning. So that was really great. And I think overall this is really going to simplify how we work going into the future, having this clear vision with a set of priorities that we can use to make better decisions about existing resources, but also new investment that is there in the future. So that's from me. And if I can take members to the recommendations. So the recommendations in this report are for members are asked to adopt the plan. What we mean by that is, as we've set out, is using as a tool to inform and support decision makings about the Black Isle. We'd ask members to note Opportunity Black Isle is both a local place plan in line with national planning legislation and that area plan in line with Highland's place-based framework as set out in December 21. And note the plan will be taken into account in preparation of the Highland Local Development Plan as guided by Planning Scotland Act 2019. And note those next steps for progressing the work set out in the plan. Thank you.
No, thank you, Fiona. And I take it everybody's happy to adopt, agree, and note all of those things.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate everything that's gone into that. So, moving on, we're at item number 6, Winter Service Plan for 24-25. I wasn't sure, do we still have Ian Moncrief with us? Or yes, we
still
do.
Here. Yeah.
So yes, we've got the drawings and the pictures in the report, but if you'd be happy to have a quick few words about it, that would be really much appreciated, Ian.
Yes, thank you, councillors. It's the same report as last year, the same routes, the same resources, and the same gritters. I don't know whether the councillors would want a more detailed report or to move on to the questions and answers.
What's your thoughts, Derek?
This reminds me of the sort of old job appraisals they used to get in the 1980s, where the route stayed, everything stays the same except the date. So I think on the basis that this worked in our area, worked pretty well last year. I think I'd go along with Ian's approach and change the date and just hope that hope it works as well in the current year as it did in the past. So thanks, Ian, for the report.
Yeah, what I was going to just jump in and say very quickly myself was, first of all, I think it's important that the folk that are working on the roads in the winter should be thanked for what they do and going out in all weathers at times when the rest of us want to be cosy by the fire. And so yes, I always know that I appreciate and feel safe going out after you've seen the orange light of a gritter go past on a dark winter's night. And I'm quite sure other people feel just exactly the same. But I did read with interest and report that the number of gritters in the area being 8, and I think given that's quite what seems like a low number of gritters, the work that they do to get around most areas by daybreak is amazing. So my thanks to the team on that one. Councillor Atkin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's that some of the heroics last year were pretty spectacular actually for the team. And I mean, I'm always make a point of putting out on any of my social media, thanking, because I mean, people are quite quick to jump and complain about the council, obviously, many times. But I mean, if there's good work going out there, I for one will always fire an email off to you or Laura or the team. My one thing is individual people, in our villages, in our communities, knowing exactly what we do and do not do is hugely important, especially on the paths and the grit bins and the community resilience. There might be villages that don't have that. I mean, it's again the communications issue, isn't it? I mean, I still think the old village notice board is just as effective as a bit of social media, personally. Maps and clear bullet points of this is what we are doing, this is what our budget allows us to do. I mean, if we all had as individual councillors that kind of basic information to just put out there would be hugely helpful, because people email us, oh, why haven't you done that, path outside X, Y, or Z? Well, we don't do that, but we can enable communities to do that. And a lot of people know that, but plenty of people aren't aware of that. And just a bit of truth telling and honesty, I just don't think it goes amiss. Makes life easier for you guys too, I think. So just on the comms side, I mean, should I go to the comms to kind of nail that down? Don't take for granted that everybody knows that council can't do everything. This is the point.
We do have winter leaflets which are produced both physically and on our web, Councillor Atkin, and that highlights the routes that we treat and their priorities. I believe that also talk about community self-help and reliance. So I can fish out that link to you and send that through.
Oh, that'd be super helpful. So are we all happy to approve the winter services plan?
Agreed.
Great, agreed.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time again this morning, Ian.
Not at all. Thanks very much.
Okay.
And I'll certainly pass on your thanks to the operatives, because I know it means quite a bit, so I'll certainly do that. Thanks very much.
Very much appreciated. Thank you, Ian.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, swiftly moving on to item number 7, and we have the various, I think, 4 common good reports. So, hello, Dot. It's lovely to see you.
And to see you all members as well. Thank you. So the first of the reports before you is the Cromarty Common Good Q4 monitoring. It's quite a brief report. Happy to take any questions on it.
I think it was all fairly self-explanatory. If MD's... No. Super.
Okay. So happy to note that one, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. And the second one before you is Fortrose Common Good Q4 reporting as well. So similarly, unless you want me to go through it, happy to take any questions.
Is everyone happy with the as reported in front of them? Oh, Sarah.
I just had a point, Dot, on, what is common good and what isn't, and what's within the kind of common good portfolio. Because I don't know how closely you're liaising with Terra Tracker, Mr. Terra Tracker and the officer, Paul, because I just inquired about a piece of land, and it actually transpired that in one of the villages that is actually common good land that they hadn't realised was common good land. So this is going to be quite an interesting process, isn't it, to determine who owns what, where. I mean, because any bit of land could potentially generate common good income, even if it was parking, whatever, you know. And I just wondered how closely the common good function is liaising with Paul and the Terra Tracker project.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Terra Tracker, there is a close liaison, and I think where there is any suggestion or thought that there might be a link with common good, then that contact is made with the common good officer, who will go through all the titles, etc., and be able to confirm or otherwise whether it is common good. But we can certainly get you a kind of process that's set out back to you for your information.
Great. I just find the whole Terra Tracker thing just hugely exciting. It's
Fascinating.
it's amazing. Yeah, it's
Fascinating.
incredible that we will know all this information. So great, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So are we all happy to note the Fortrose figures? Fantastic.
Thank you.
And then so I'll be moving on to Invergordon next.
Thank you, Chair. That's me presenting this one. I'll take the same approach as Dot. Although I would just note that following your decision at the last committee, the work has started on the application to the Sheriff Court for the Bouchardon bust, and we'll make sure that you're kept updated with the progress. But if there's any other questions, happy to take them, members.
Anything? Are we all quite happy to note that then?
Please.
Super duper. And then the last one we're moving on to is Tain.
So likewise, I will just take the questions. If members have anything, the report is fairly straightforward. Thank you.
Councillor Loudon.
No luck. Phil, first opportunity to ask you. I've had a sort of a question with an open end date on it, which is a proof of ownership of Blarlaith. The land was acquired by Tain Town Council, and the suggestion is that it's potentially common good land. Now, it was developed subsequently by Highland Council, and there's been no update on this in terms of whether it's owned by the common good or whether it's owned by the Highland Council. There's been I've asked the question for 7 years. There's no answer being forthcoming, but I'm wondering if that's something that is potentially going to be answered at some point in the early future before my term of office comes to an end in 3 years' time. Could you give me a timeline for getting an answer to that question? I welcome the interest rate on the balances seems to have gone up. And the other issue is the balances that are there appear to be the usable balances, and I'm assuming that doesn't include the money that was set aside for potential replacement of the mussel fishing boat at some point in the future. I think there's another 110,000 held in a different account, and I'm hoping that's earning as good a rate of interest as this.
Okay, thank you. I'll look into Blarlaith. Is this the area that's where the industrial estate is?
Yes.
Okay. I'm fairly sure that a lot of work has been done on that, but I'll get you an update, Councillor Loudon, and let you know where we are with it and what the prospect is for further work to be done on that. The second question was relating to the balance, I think. I don't know whether that 219 includes a separate fund that's been put aside for the muscle boat. If that was received as cash, that may well include it, but I will find out and we'll give you an answer on that. And forgive me, was there a third question?
It was an observation that there will be interest being earned on the other 100,000, and I'm wondering where that's gone. Is that included in the interest income that we have here, or is that held separately? Or no, the balance should certainly be higher if the 110,000 is included, and you know, I'm hoping that whatever that balance is held, it's earning as good a return as the balance that's there, and confirmation of whether the interest earned is included in the interest earned figure there would be really good.
Okay, I'll get that information for you. Thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you both, Phil and Dot, for all your work with the Common Good funds there. Really appreciate it. Okay, so we're now moving on to item number 8, which is the ward discretionary awards, and these are really just for noting. Is everybody happy with item number 8? Fantastic.
Yes.
So this is the point in the meeting when we get to finally welcome Callum McPherson in, who's been patiently waiting for an update on the Cromarty Firth Green Freeport. I think we're all really looking forward to your presentation, Callum. So over to you when you're ready.
Hi there, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, and I thought what I would do is sort of go through a sort of brief verbal presentation and then really open up time for questions and discussion, rather than pelt you with multiple slides, which I'm sure you're used to seeing at these kind of things. So I suppose really it was, and it's also just part of an ongoing exchange. Obviously, very keen to keep the conversation going, because we're kind of at the start of a journey, really, rather than the end of one or even the middle of one. So I did send a brief written update, but effectively where we are after sort of 3 or 4 years, where we're still at the stage of hopefully getting the full business case finally signed off by the UK and Scottish governments. I was very grateful to the support from the council members who endorsed the plan in June. Timing was definitely right, because once the general election was called, a lot of things were put on hold. So I think the 2 Welsh reports got caught out by that. So they're a bit in limbo at the moment until things kind of loosen up down there. So we've had our full business case presented now. It's being reviewed. But the reality is that the majority of the work has been done. And as you'll maybe be aware, that the legislation that sort of puts the Freeport and the tax sites in place is already approved. So we're cracking on and making headway. So I guess the sort of main sort of 2 or 3 areas I want to highlight, just where some of the work that's been ongoing, and also just during this exchange, to particularly from elected members, just get your own views, advice, perceptions, anything else that would be really welcome. The reality is we work really closely with the ports and harbours that are around. So, for example, and maybe some of you are on the call. A month or 2 back, we had the regular catch up with Port of Nig and the community councils, and I kind of came on that call as well, and we'll be doing that more and more with different ports and harbours, because obviously there's a lot of community engagement happening, with these individual locations and businesses and organisations as well. But one of the things we're looking at closely is our skills workforce development plan. It's a huge issue, in as much as, for me as a local, the real benefit will come in is if we can ensure that the opportunity goes to as much as possible to those either looking to come to the area, but those wanting to remain in the area, and those young folks starting to come through the supply chain. You should all be aware we still hemorrhage about 2,500 young folk from the Highlands every year, and this is, for me, this is a key driver to why we're doing this, to try and allow people to stay in the area if they wish to. So working really closely with the council, Skills Development Scotland, developing young workforce, Department for Work and Pensions, and everybody else who's involved. We're looking at creating a sort of a strategy for the area to provide young people, particularly with pathways to work in the renewable sector, particularly, obviously our focus is offshore wind. We've got hundreds of jobs already being created, and maybe we should be communicating that a bit more, but there's already hundreds of jobs being created in the area through this. And indeed, companies like Aurora Energy Services and others who've located their premises, their expansion, not just, they were in Aberdeen and that's where they historically grew, but now they've come to this area. So we've got lots of companies and others who are coming to the area, and we need to help kind of identify them. We had it's back in February now, we had a careers fair, and actually in Allness, but all the schools were invited, including Fortrose and all other schools came along to that, and we had about 600 fourth year students coming to that, and I'm hearing from 30 different organisations what opportunities there were. So again, that's just the start of the journey. We'll keep that communication going up so people can see what's coming forward. And I was really pleased to hear that one company in particular, CRC Evans, who've got a base in Easter Ross but are looking at the wider area, they had 15 apprenticeships they put out there, and they had 160 applicants, of which they said 70 were excellent. So, they shared those applicants with other businesses in the area so that they weren't, those didn't lose out an opportunity. So the skills, there's a lot of work happening there, and we're looking at a number of initiatives around how we, not just school children, but those who are looking to change career, because we've got, for example, we've got a retired police officer who's just finished his welding course. We've got a lot of ex-defence RAF people who are looking to diversify their careers, or those who've maybe not been in the workplace for a while. So all of those people will be really important to us going forward for resourcing what's coming next. And I should say, on this whole job creation and workforce development thing, there's a bit of a balance, because these jobs aren't all coming tomorrow. It's over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So there's a little bit of a balance, which I'm always open to your advice on about, not over-promising, but at the same time allowing people to start making decisions for their careers or their plans. And we've obviously been really careful in mapping out where they are, and there are jobs coming, and there have jobs come, but this is going to be a growth over the next sort of 5-10 years, but certainly the next 2 or 3 years we'll start to see the employment ramp up. The other thing we've been working on is trying to bring business to the area. So even this week we've had visitors from abroad coming to the area looking at investing and creating jobs in this part of the world. We're really focusing on like some manufacturing jobs. We're wanting jobs that are long term and high value. And obviously we've put down a lot of importance on the kinds of jobs we want to come here, their value, their long term nature. So that's happening in the background on a very regular basis. We're probably one of the top 2 or 3 locations at the moment in the UK who are getting visits from inward investors and those looking to come here and create a long term investment. The last one I was going to touch on, and there are many others, the last one I was going to touch on is around communications, particularly with communities and with likes of yourselves. Because we don't have our full business case fully signed off, there's again a little bit of the element of being careful or presumptuous, especially as the government changed in London, and there may well be some changes around what's happening there. But we have and continue to meet in groups on a regular basis. One of the ones that I've been meeting regularly with, and I'm going to meet again with soon, is the University of the Third Age, U3A. I don't know if anybody's been involved with them, so they always give me a good grilling for a couple of hours, but it's always really enlightening, because the really positive thing for me is they immediately go and say, and the majority of those who attend that are of an age where they have grandchildren, so they always say, right, we're definitely going to go and tell our grandchildren to go right now and consider these things. So we have done some online community webinars, and we're going to be releasing another community newsletter, which we send to all elected members, also through the community councils as well. But part of today, the reason I'm today is also just to make sure I'm getting linkages with those of you who are quite close to what communities are saying and doing. And of course, the the Black Isle Place Plan is one of those things that's going to be a really useful tool for us going forward, because one of the things we want to do is we do start to generate a bit of income, which we haven't done yet because we haven't got the investment hasn't really get going yet. But as we do, we start wanting to look at what kind of community projects we can help support and drive as well. So the last thing on communications that I'll do and I'll continue to do is a bit of myth busting. I don't know what it is about discourse at the moment in the public in Britain, but it seems to be where there's a little gap, people are making things up. So we're continuing to sort of have to to push on that back. I mean, I live in Bewley, and I still hear people saying things like, "Oh well, but there's no workers' rights in the Freeport," to which I say that's complete and utter fabrication. Whoever says that is just making things up. So we need to keep that message going about what the Freeport isn't. We're a not-for-profit small business. I have 2 other employees, so we're not a massive business, albeit we work really closely with colleagues in the council and other public bodies. So we're absolutely driven by long-term benefit for the Highlands, and not just the Inner Murray Firth area, I should add. It's for me. I lived in the West Coast. I've lived in Fort William. I think we could bring benefit to the wider region as well as just Inner Murray Firth. So that's the kind of long-term aims. We're at the start of our journey. We've got lots of information on our website and other things that are happening. And on an individual basis, very happy to come and speak to any of you at any time. So, for example, I'm coming soon to speak to the folks at Cromarty Harbour Trust to look about things we can be working with them. And we're open to any conversations we can have to try and give people a bit more clarity on what's happening, accepting that we're at the start of a journey, not at the end of one.
Thank you so much for your time today, Callum, and that was really, really interesting. I think the opportunities that this can bring for the whole area is going to be vast, and it's just about having the right people, the right timing, isn't it, to grab hold of these opportunities and make the most of them, really. So yeah, I'd like to open it up for members who've got questions or comments. Oh, we're quick off the mark there.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that, Carl. It was really interesting. I was really interested in what you were saying about tapping into the ex-forces. I don't know if you know, but I'm the Highland Reserves and Forces Cadets representative for the Highland Council, and I recently had a meeting just last week with their head of sort of employment engagement there, and he was talking about the issues around supporting ex forces. So it was really interesting what you were saying, and it was interesting what you were saying about Aurora as well. And I was keen to know if you were in contact with them, or if you would be happy for me to put them in contact with you, because I know it'd be something they'd be really interested in, because we've got such a wealth of ex-services here, both with Kinross and Lossiemouth and Fort George, and they've got such a wealth of knowledge and information and skills behind them, and I think if we could make those transferable to what you're doing, that'd be absolutely fantastic, and I know it would help you and them, so I think that's a really good opportunity.
And that wasn't any contact would be really welcomed. We've had a few conversations with them as well. In fact, we're I feel like my business is a small business, and we've signed up to the Armed Forces Government as well, just to sort of demonstrate the intention. And we're working with all the ports and harbours and big employers in the area to say, listen, there is an amazing source of experienced people coming out of the armed services in the area. I guess one of the station commanders kind of said to me, yeah, but don't nickel our people before we're done with them. It's because I think they're slightly concerned that all the engineers, all the electrical people will get soaked up. But as you know, a lot of those people are finishing or retire when they're relatively young, in their early 50s. So with a great amount of potential for the area still to come. So I'd really welcome that introduction if I could, and happy to speak to any group we can. We have done a couple, but we're sort of pressing that more, because we don't really want those people to leave the area once they're finished here as well. We'd love for them to stay, and that's definitely part of the plan.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'll definitely put you in touch. And I was also just wondering as well about the Cromarty Harbour meeting that you are having. I didn't know if it'd be possible to open up to councillors, because it'd be really fantastic to be able to attend and get the information that you're sharing with them, just so that when people come to us and they ask us questions, we have the answers there. We're not having to come to you and pester you for those answers. It'd be helpful. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is so they've kind of asked for the catch up. So what I'll do is I'll speak to them, and then I don't overstep my mark with them. I'll ask them if it's possible to catch up with you guys as well at the same time. But I mean, really, I've already been sending some traffic their way in terms of visiting boats and the like. We had some French students who came over to do a study, so suggested Cromarty Harbour was the place to go, which they did. So there's opportunity there as well, but also there's a bigger dynamic around how the overall Cromarty Firth is going to be used going forward. So, but no, I'll definitely do that. If I can pull into that conversation, I'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Arakan, your hand is up next.
Yeah, obviously, the skills and the jobs side is so hopeful, isn't it, to keep our young people? It occurs to me that a careers fair, which has just sound fantastic, and I hope a lot of our local kids went along from the Black Isle. But I just feel, something like that needs to get to like S1, S2, so that the mindset of young people is very focused on, what the hard work and you need to put in at school in order to take these opportunities. Because for young people, incentives are just the key to knuckling down and, working hard, because none of this is going to fall off a log. You don't just rock up and say, I can take, looking at the business plan, the number of jobs that are quite highly qualified is a quite high proportion. And I honestly believe our young people have just as much a shot at this as any other kids in the country. And we just need to get their mindset really focused on, this is what you need to study, and you need to achieve in this area of work and across the board to get a really kind of the highest academic attainment you can get and all the skills you need in school. And I think a jobs fair for much younger kids would really fire kids up.
There definitely is, and I should also say that working with particularly with Highland Council, obviously your new chief executive is a sort of educationalist to trade, and he's absolutely behind us in getting that message from primary school onwards. And there is quite a lot happening in the STEM area, as you point, the science, technology, engineering, maths area as it is. But interestingly, what we're finding quite often is it's quite often the parents that are needing a bit of because so we've had examples locally where we've sort of communicating to girls and boys of all ages what opportunities are coming forward. It's not just welding, it's about environmental work, it's about consultancy, it's about a whole range of things. Quite often they'll be aware, but their folks will have absolutely no idea that they've been hearing about that at school. So they're still sort of pushing them to do certain things. And I know, because I've got two teenagers myself, that you don't always hear what's happening at school. There could have been a spaceship landed and they wouldn't tell you that's happened. So it's that about getting the whole families educated. What I'd also say, just on your point about trying to get through to the kids as well, I've been a couple of things recently where you've got the usual face lineup of teenagers face down on their phones, hardly listening to you, and I just kind of say, guys, put your phone down for a second. Does anybody want a car? That usually gets them to put the phone down. Say, would anybody like a really nice car and a really nice house? And you can sort of see them going, oh, what's this angle? And I'm saying, because for the first time in the Highlands, in a long time, really, you've got a massive opportunity to have, real prosperity, but you don't have to leave the area if you don't want to. And there are companies and other people who are willing to train you to do this, but you have to work for it. You have to listen, and you have to, so that nobody can ever say you weren't told. So it's about trying to just connect with them at a young enough age that it becomes an opportunity. But I'm pleased to say I think the message is kind of getting out there a little bit. And the other thing as well is about I'm sure most of you did. I know that I did. I left the area to go and study, and if people do, that's fine. That's nothing wrong with seeing the world. But I think the amount of vocational placements that are coming forward now is really interesting. So people don't have to have student debt. They can sign up and get employment from a business who will take you through your training, and you will leave the area to do some of it, but you've got a job, and more opportunity to stay in the region if you want to. So.
Oh, and come back. You know, I do know kids of, you know, friends who would have come back had there been the engineering job or whatever, but their first job was in Manchester or where, you know, and that's where you kind of stay. You know, they're still there because there wasn't the job that they wanted here. But, so again, you know, people will come back if there are these jobs. But it's the mindset, isn't it? It's about, I think primaries are doing a lot, but I think there is that dip in early secondary where there may be a little bit of drift and less of a focus. So anything that incentivizes, you know, pre-teens and teens is going to be worth it.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And lastly, Councillor Loudon.
Thanks for dispensing with the and by no means least. Thanks again, Cal, for coming along and talking to us. I'm glad you've been doing some work on workers' rights, environmental protections, and sort of real wage employer stuff. Some of the stuff that's out there is just crazy, and you've no idea where they come from. But getting in there with a bit of rebuttal is, I think, a really helpful thing. But what I want to talk about is engagement with schools, going back to where I grew up in the 1970s, and the engagement that there was between NIG and the schools in terms of the skills that they were needing, and sort of a willingness to invest in equipment. The recognition that young people are going to be a vital component in the success of the Green Freeport. So getting in there early and interacting with them is really good, but also helping the schools to identify the skills that are going to be required, so that they can tailor what they're doing at an early stage to match those skills with the likely jobs that are going to be out there for them when they get to the end of that process. I think that's really important. We've talked before. There's a big focus on decarbonising in the Highlands. A lot of the initial movers in discussions on green hydrogen were manufacturers, some from traditional industries, who could see the opportunities that could come along here to help them to decarbonise. So those skills, it's great if we're going to develop the ability to tackle those things locally. I'm hoping that UHI will be involved in that process. And I guess I'm maybe thinking about that particularly, the news over the last week about Val McKeever, who's passed away, but who I credit with the opportunity to come back to the Highlands. I could have stayed working in Aberdeen, but came back here for the opportunity to lecture at the new UHI and to help to get those degree programs off the ground. So I'm hoping that some of those environmental skills that I know have been worked on in in the colleges around the Highlands will have another opportunity for help and assistance with the funding that you'll be able to access from the things that are in the Green Freeport plan. So last point, there used to be a system of scholarship awards from NIG in particular. I think named in memory of Wolf Pabst, who was as a senior manager at NIG at the time. And I'm wondering if something like that could be an element in the future, so that if students are going away to study engineering and chemistry and the things that are going to be needed in STEM subjects, that some assistance with that could be provided, and that funding would also be available to students studying locally, so that they're not disadvantaged in any way through not going away. And I'll finish at that.
Yeah, well, just I'll go a couple of those points, and I'll maybe let Maureen come in as well, because it might be there's crossover. But basically on your last point, first of all, one of the things we're trying to do that no other Freeport was doing was creating a fund for focus on apprenticeships and scholarships and things, because the reality is, as everybody knows, is there's not more public money out there, there's less. And in fact, one of the funds that we'd hoped to tap into across the UK, called the Investment Opportunity Fund, was taken away last Monday. So if you like, the noose is getting tighter, not looser. So we've for every job that's created by the private sector here, we're going to ask them for £1,800 overall to help create a fund, which will go towards things like scholarships, apprenticeships, and everything else. Because as you maybe know, we're in a crazy situation where even in Inverness College last year, there were 700 applicants who didn't get apprenticeship funding. So there's 700 people who are trying to do apprenticeships, not just in offshore work, that was everything, but there's not enough funded places for people wanting to study in the Highlands at the moment. So we're trying to help resolve that. Green hydrogen is definitely a focus. There are some live, very significant inquiries around green hydrogen and ammonia production in the area. We've obviously got some smaller ones that are already progressing, as you'll know, with Ben Tierson Wind Farm and the guys at Stariga are looking to try and do some green hydrogen production for distillation, so for the distilleries. And we're one of only 2 areas in Scotland that attracted a hydrogen round 1 funding. So we're kind of pretty well placed in the area to do something. The big issue there, as you may be aware, is grid connection, because I think the potential to create green hydrogen is fantastic, especially when we're going to have lots of offshore wind power needing a home. The challenge, of course, is when can you connect up? So there's obviously people are looking really closely at how we can have that power in the Highlands and then use it here if we can, again, to add value to the local economy. But it's just about how you get connected. So on the skills thing, I'll just finish quickly by saying this one. It was and I might be standing people's toes here, but I'll just say it as it is. In January this year, we asked a question around, what is the overall workforce development strategy for our region? Now, I know that the council actually had looked at this end of last year, but it was clear to me that by the time you take universities, Skills Development Scotland, Department for Work and Pensions, what we're doing, there's probably about a dozen bodies all engaged in skills learning and workforce development in some shape or form. And there's no real clear strategy for how we take this coming forward. So, for example, I've already got some people coming to us saying we're thinking of creating hundreds of jobs here. We're wondering how you're going to get the workforce in place. What's the strategy for that? Now, as you might expect, I've got a good answer. We are looking at that. We've developed it, but it's probably needing fleshed out. So that's something we are working with, particularly I have to say with council on at the moment, is how we get that whole career pathway for kids coming through, people changing career, people coming back to work, if they do make that decision, how they get trained, how that can be funded, and how we get them linked in really closely, Derek, with businesses. Because your point around businesses working hand in hand with individual applicants stuff in the past, that has to happen again. It absolutely has to happen again. So it's one of those probably the top 2 things my work to do the next while, but it'll be done hand in hand with everybody else as well. Thank you.
Oh, Maureen, come on
Yeah.
in.
Come on in. Come on down. Thanks, Callum. When you were just talking about skills, and that's it went through my mind that have you spoken with the likes of Youth Highland and High Life Highland? These they work with a lot of the youth that maybe are not in the academia side of things, and because I know of one particular lad down here in our own community who he didn't see his way all the way through school, but he went and got an apprenticeship in one of the garages in Inverness, and he's a first-class mechanic now. He's doing really well, but he went through Youth Highland, and they helped him. I can give you, I don't know, have you spoken to Claire Nichols at all?
We have, and or rather my colleague Ali Vass has. And but you know, it's one thing that's been quite interesting in this discussion is if you speak to a lot of the people who are in leadership roles now, quite often in this industry, not that many of them went through a university course. A lot of them started on the tools and kind of learnt the job that way and went through. And if we're not tracking people like that, then we're losing out potentially some of the best people going forward. High Life Highland is somebody we've spoken to, but probably it's an area. In fact, Youth Highland is somebody that probably I need to speak to a bit more in terms of Claire and what they're doing there. But we are speaking to. So, for example, even in the council, you've got employability services. David Bogue and others have been speaking to there just to understand how we can access those who don't typically reflect on going through college or university. Maybe are more interested in just getting straight into a job. So, but I'll make sure we are speaking to Claire. Even more, I know that we have met, but I'll pick up again actually.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Callum. Really appreciate it. And it's always really interesting to get an update about the free report. And so, yeah, thank you for all your time today. Really, really much appreciated.
You're welcome. And I would also just say, particularly with some of the communities and councils and others as well, if there's a get together of all the community council chairs or something, I think, Sarah, you might have mentioned that to me before. Very happy to speak to them. I used to live near Kilbokey, and I've still got a lot of people I know down there. So, the only way we can help communicate what's happening is by meeting people and talking. And also, I'm very open, especially to elected members, for any advice or heads up on anything, anytime. Please just get in touch with me, because part of the bigger team really, but a small team in ourselves. So we need all the support we can get.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Callum. And totally biased, but Kilbokey's a brilliant part of the world.
Disagree with you, absolutely. Thank you, Rachel. I'll leave you to get on with the ongoing business, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
So
Callum.
we are on to our very last item, which is just the noting of the previous minutes of our last meeting. So are we happy with those, or do we have any changes we need made? Are we all happy and delighted? Fantastic.
Happy.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for your time today, because we've got through quite a lot of stuff there, and I appreciate all your time this morning and your attendance. So, and then I think the next time we meet, we'll have some new councillors amongst our numbers, so that will be definitely interesting. But the one last thing I'd like to finish off on is that I'm very much aware that tomorrow is SQA results. I think I'd like to wish the best of luck to all the pupils in our area who are waiting on their SQA results. So good luck to all of them. Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.